The Unshakable Mind. How to master your emotions before they master you. Before we begin, get comfortable. Wherever you're listening from, at a desk, on a commute, or lying in the dark with your eyes already closed, you don't need to do anything right now, except listen. There's nothing to write down yet, nothing to prepare. Just let your shoulders drop half an inch and let your breathing slow to whatever pace it wants to find on its own. Here's what this is. Not a lecture, not a lists and bullet points productivity talk. This is a long, slow walk through one single idea, turned over from every angle until it becomes something you actually own instead of something you just heard once and forgot by the weekend. The idea is simple to say and genuinely hard to live. The space between what happens to you and what you do about it is the most valuable, most trainable, and most neglected real estate most people never think to develop. Everyone listening to this has a story just like the ones you're about to hear. A message sent too fast, a voice raised at exactly the wrong moment, a decision made in 5 seconds of heat that took months to undo. That's not a character flaw. It's biology running an old program. And like anything biological, it can be retrained not through willpower alone, but through understanding the actual mechanism well enough to work with it instead of constantly fighting it. Over the next hour and a half, we'll move slowly through 18 ideas, the ancient wiring behind your reactions, the exact moment a trigger hijacks your judgment, a real 4-step method you can use the next time your chest goes hot, how elite performers train for chaos long before it arrives, how to rewrite the meaning of what happens to you, how to sharpen focus into something close to a weapon, and how genuine rest fits into all of it. None of it requires you to become a different person. It only asks you to widen a gap that's already there, whether you've noticed it before or not. So take one slow breath in and let it out even slower than it came in. That's the whole practice, and it starts now. The cost of reacting. There's a version of you that exists for exactly 4 seconds. Not the calm version, not the version people admire. The version that shows up right after something goes wrong. The 4 seconds before you speak, before you hit send, before your hand moves. Most people never meet that version of themselves. They skip straight past it because reacting feels faster than thinking. And for a while, that seems to work. Until the day it doesn't. Picture a regional sales director. We'll call her the closer because that's what everyone called her. She had built a reputation over 9 years. The person who could walk into a dying deal and bring it back to life. Then one Tuesday, a client emailed her at 11:47 p.m. with a single cutting line questioning her competence in front of the entire executive chain. She read it once. Her chest went hot. 20 seconds later, she had typed a reply that was accurate, sharp, and completely unforgivable. She hit send before her coffee had even finished brewing. By Thursday, the account was gone. Not because her argument was wrong, because her timing was. That's the tax reacting charges you. It doesn't ask whether you're right. It only asks whether you're fast. Here is the strange part. Almost nobody plans to lose control. Nobody wakes up intending to say the thing they'll apologize for later. And yet it keeps happening to smart people, disciplined people, people who read the right books and know better. Why? Because knowing better and being wired differently are two separate problems, and only one of them responds to information. The other one responds to training. This is a story about that second problem. Not motivation, not willpower, training. Over the next hour and a half, we're going to take apart the machinery of a human reaction, piece by piece, and rebuild it into something you actually control. We'll walk through why your brain sabotages you in ordinary moments. What's really happening in the 4 seconds after a trigger, a reset method you can use in real time. How elite performers train for chaos before it arrives. How to rewrite the meaning of what happens to you. How to sharpen your attention into a weapon. How to name your emotions with surgical precision. Why obsessing over outcomes destroys performance. How to prepare for disaster before it knocks. And how real recovery works. So you don't burn out chasing calm. None of this is about becoming numb. Numbness isn't mastery. It's just a different kind of malfunction. The goal isn't to stop feeling. It's to stop being owned by what you feel. There's a difference between a lake and a flood. Both are made of water. One destroys the town. The other feeds it for 100 years. The difference is never the water. It's the banks that hold it. By the end of this, you'll understand exactly how those banks are built. Get comfortable. Let's begin. Why your brain betrays you. To understand why you react the way you do, you have to stop thinking of your brain as one thing and start thinking of it as two tenants sharing the same building, an old one and a new one. And the old one still has a key to every door. The old tenant moved in roughly 200,000 years ago. Its entire job was survival in an environment where the wrong hesitation meant becoming another animal's dinner. It doesn't read. It doesn't reason. It watches for movement, sound, and threat, and it fires a full-body alarm in a fraction of a second, because a fraction of a second was, for most of human history, the difference between living and not living. That tenant never got the memo that things changed. It still runs the building like there's a predator behind every doorway. The new tenant moved in far more recently. The thinking brain, the part that plans, weighs consequences, and remembers that you have a mortgage and a reputation to protect. It's brilliant. It's also slow, painfully slow, compared to its downstairs neighbor. Neuroscientists have measured the gap, and it isn't subtle. The alarm system fires many times faster than the reasoning system can even begin to process what happened. So imagine a modern office building fitted with a fire alarm system designed by someone who had never seen a kitchen. Somebody makes toast. The alarm doesn't check whether it's a fire. It just screams, sprinklers activate, the whole floor evacuates, because the system was built for smoke, not nuance. That's what happens every time a text message arrives with a flat tone, every time a colleague's eyebrow raises half a centimeter during a meeting, every time your card gets declined at a checkout line with people watching. The old tenant doesn't check for nuance. It just screams. And here's the part that makes it personal. The alarm gets loudest exactly when something threatens your identity, your competence, your control, your worth in the eyes of someone whose opinion matters to you. A stranger's rude comment barely registers. Your business partner's rude comment can ruin your whole week. Same volume of words, wildly different alarm response. That's because the old tenant isn't just guarding your body anymore. Somewhere along the way, it started guarding your ego too, and it treats a bruised ego with the same emergency protocol it once reserved for claws and teeth. This isn't a flaw you were personally issued. It's standard equipment. Every human alive is running this same outdated alarm system layered underneath a much newer operating system, and the outdated one still has administrator privileges. The good news buried inside that bad news is this. If the alarm system runs on repetition and pattern, then repetition and pattern are exactly what you can use to retrain it. You cannot delete the old tenant. You can, however, teach it new patterns until it stops treating toast like a wildfire. That retraining is the entire subject of everything that follows. The hijack. Let's slow down one single moment to the point of almost stopping time, because everything that matters happens inside it. Someone says something. Maybe it's dismissive. Maybe it's just careless. Within roughly 1/5 of a second, faster than you can consciously register the sentence, your body has already begun to change. Your heart rate climbs. Stress chemicals flood your bloodstream. Blood shifts away from digestion and fine motor control and toward your large muscles, because your ancient operating system has just quietly decided you might need to fight or run. Your pupils widen to gather more visual information. Your hearing narrows, tuning out background noise to focus on the perceived threat. None of this required your permission. You didn't approve any of it. It simply happened, the way a smoke detector doesn't ask before it screams. This is what's often called an emotional hijack, a moment when the alarm system essentially seizes the controls of the vehicle while the driver is still reaching for the wheel. And there's a measurable physical marker researchers use to describe it. Once heart rate crosses a certain threshold under stress, the clear-thinking part of the brain effectively goes offline. Not metaphorically, functionally. You are, for a short window, operating with reduced access to your own judgment, even though it feels like you're thinking perfectly clearly. That's the cruelest trick of the hijack. It never feels like impairment. It feels like clarity. It feels like you finally see the situation for what it really is. You don't. You're seeing it through a floodlight, not a lens. Think about a night shift emergency room nurse. 12 years on the job. She'll tell you the moment that almost got her fired wasn't a medical emergency. It was a visitor who screamed in her face over a 40-minute wait. In a hijack, her body prepared her to fight a threat that wasn't actually a threat at all, just a frightened, exhausted relative. She said things back that she doesn't remember choosing to say. Later, off shift, replaying it, she couldn't explain why a scared stranger had gotten a version of her that even she didn't recognize. That's the hijack. It doesn't check who the threat actually is. It checks how loud the alarm sounds. Here's what makes this so treacherous in daily life. Your ancient alarm system cannot reliably tell the difference between a genuine danger and a bruised feeling. A saber-toothed cat and a passive-aggressive email register on nearly the same circuitry. That's not a design flaw from evolution's perspective. For most of human history, social rejection from the tribe genuinely could mean death. So the alarm learned to treat social threats with the same urgency as physical ones. It just never got updated for a world where the tribe is a group chat and the threat is someone leaving you on read. Once you understand that the hijack is biological and universal, not a personal weakness, something shifts. You stop asking what's wrong with me and start asking what's the mechanism and how do I work with it instead of against it. That question is the actual beginning of control. Everything from here forward is the answer. The gap between the moment something happens to you and the moment you respond to it, there is a space. It's real. It's measurable in fractions of a second in some cases and full minutes in others, and almost nobody uses it because almost nobody knows it's there. Think of it like the yellow light at an intersection. The light doesn't force you to slam the brakes, and it doesn't force you to accelerate through. It gives you roughly 2 seconds of pure choice, and what you do with those 2 seconds says almost nothing about the light and everything about you. Most people treat every trigger in life like a light that's already red or already green, as if there's no yellow, no decision point, just an automatic outcome. But the yellow is always there. It's just short, and most people have never practiced looking for it. Here's a story that plays out in call centers around the world every single day. A customer service representative picks up a call. The person on the other end is already furious. Voice raised, insults flying within the first 10 seconds. None of it personal, all of it aimed at a company policy the rep didn't write and can't change. The untrained response is to match the energy. Get defensive, get short, escalate. But experienced reps describe something different happening after a few years on the job. They start to notice a strange, tiny delay opening up, a half second where they can actually feel the anger rising in their own chest. And instead of being swept along by it, they observe it rising. That half second is the entire game. It's the difference between a call that ends in a supervisor transfer and a call that ends with the customer thanking them by name. The gap doesn't remove the sting of the trigger. That's important to say clearly because a lot of people expect emotional mastery to mean the sting disappears. It doesn't. What the gap gives you is a choice about what happens next, which is a completely different thing than controlling what happens to you. You cannot control whether a client insults you, whether traffic backs up, whether a family member says something cutting at dinner. You can control whether the next 90 seconds of your life are dictated by that event or by you. Widening the gap is a trainable skill, not a fixed trait. It grows the same way a muscle grows, through repeated, deliberate use under mild resistance. The first few times you catch yourself in that space, it will feel almost accidental, like you stumbled into it. Over months of practice, it stops being accidental. The gap gets a little wider every time you use it instead of skipping past it, and eventually it becomes the default lens you see triggers through. Not because you got lucky, but because you did the rep. So here is the first practical shift to make starting today. The next time you feel that hot rush rising in your chest, don't try to eliminate it. Just try to notice the half second before your mouth or your hands move. That's it. That single act of noticing is the seed of everything this entire framework builds toward. Know your triggers. Every person walking around is carrying an invisible map of landmines, laid down over decades by old wounds. old humiliations, old fears. And most people have never actually looked at their own map. They just keep stepping on the same mines over and over, confused about why the explosion keeps happening in roughly the same spots. A trigger isn't really about the present moment. That's the part almost everyone misses. When your business partner interrupts you mid-sentence and something in you flares white hot, the flare is rarely proportional to the interruption itself. It's proportional to every other time in your life you felt talked over, dismissed, or made to feel small, stacked on top of each other like sediment, waiting for one more small event to hit the pile at just the right angle. The interruption is just the spark. The gasoline was poured years earlier. There are a handful of trigger categories that show up again and again across almost every human being, regardless of culture or background. Feeling disrespected, feeling excluded, feeling unheard, feeling out of control, feeling unfairly judged, feeling like your competence is being questioned. You can run your own life back like a highlight reel, and you'll likely find that most of your worst reactive moments cluster around 2 or 3 of these categories. Not all 6 equally. Everyone has a personal signature. Consider a small business owner who inherited the company from his father. For years, he couldn't understand why a single skeptical question from an investor would send him into a defensive spiral that lasted the rest of the day, while the exact same question from a friend barely registered. Eventually, in a quiet moment, he traced it back. His father used a question every decision he made in front of employees when he was starting out, and the humiliation of being doubted publicly had never actually been processed, just buried. The investor wasn't reopening an old wound on purpose. He was just standing, unknowingly, on a landmine planted 20 years earlier. The exercise here is simple, and it's uncomfortable precisely because it works. Take the last 5 moments you can remember losing your composure, really losing it, not just a minor irritation. Write down what was said or what happened right before. Then write down what you told yourself it meant. Not what happened, what it meant to you. Patterns will surface almost immediately, usually within the first 3 entries. That pattern is your personal map. Knowing your map doesn't make the landmines disappear, but it does something almost as valuable. It means you stop being ambushed by your own history in real time. You start to feel a flare coming and recognize it. There's that one again, instead of being blindsided by it as if it came from nowhere. Recognition is the first real form of defusing. You cannot defuse what you refuse to look at. The reaction addiction. Here's an uncomfortable truth that almost nobody says out loud. Losing your temper feels good. Not afterward, in the moment. There's a rush to it, a hit of righteous heat that feels a lot like power. And that feeling isn't an accident of your personality. It's chemistry, and chemistry is exactly why so many people quietly keep reacting even when they know, intellectually, that it costs them. When you react impulsively, your brain releases a small dose of reward chemistry. The same basic circuitry that makes a slot machine addictive, that makes checking a phone addictive, that makes an argument on social media strangely hard to walk away from. In the split second after you fire off the sharp reply or the raised voice, there's a genuine sense of relief and even satisfaction. You told them. You won the exchange. It feels like strength. The bill for that feeling arrives later, usually with interest in the form of a damaged relationship, a lost deal, or a private cringe at 2 in the morning. But the brain doesn't naturally connect the reward to the delayed cost. It only remembers that reacting felt like winning. This is exactly the mechanism behind why online arguments are so hard to abandon even when you know they're pointless. Why gossip is so satisfying even when you know it's corrosive. Why road rage keeps happening even to people who consider themselves calm. It isn't weakness. It's a reward loop, and reward loops don't respond to logic. They respond to being interrupted and replaced with a different loop. Think of a mid-level manager who prided himself on being the calm one at work, right up until he got behind the wheel. On the road, a stranger's minor mistake would trigger 10 full minutes of shouting inside a sealed car nobody else could hear. He described it later as almost enjoyable in a strange way, like venting pressure from a valve. That's the addiction in plain sight, a controlled, private arena where reacting felt free of consequence. which made it easy to keep feeding. The uncomfortable reframe here is this. Every time you indulge a reaction, you're not just having an isolated bad moment. You are reinforcing a pathway that makes the next reaction slightly easier and slightly more automatic. And every time you interrupt that pathway instead, pause where you normally explode, you weaken it by that same small amount. Neither happens instantly. Both happen through repetition, the exact same mechanism, just running in opposite directions. So the goal isn't to shame yourself for enjoying the rush. That shame is just another reaction, and it doesn't help. The goal is to recognize the loop for what it is, a real, chemical, short-term reward wearing the costume of righteousness. Once you can see the costume, it gets a lot harder for it to fool you the next time it shows up at your door. The 4 stages of mastery. Nobody goes from constant reaction to complete composure in a single decision. It happens in stages, and almost everyone alive is sitting somewhere on this ladder right now, usually without realizing which rung. Picture the whole journey as a river. At the first stage, the river has no banks at all. Every rainstorm becomes a flood. There's no separation between the water and the land. They're the same event. This is what full reactivity looks like in a person. Whatever you feel, you become. Someone criticizes you, and for the next hour, you simply are the anger, fully merged with it. No space between the emotion and your identity. Most people spend years, sometimes decades, mostly living here without recognizing it as a stage at all. They just think that's who they are. The second stage is a river with banks that occasionally get overwhelmed. The flood still happens, you still say the sharp thing, still send the message you regret, but afterward you notice. A voice inside says, I didn't need to do that. That noticing is enormous, even though it feels like nothing at the time, even though it often comes with a wave of guilt. The guilt is not a sign of failure. It's the sound of a witness waking up inside you for the first time, an inner observer that used to be completely silent and is now, finally, speaking up, even if only after the fact. The third stage is a dam with functioning gates. This is where you feel the full pressure of the flood, the anger, the fear, the humiliation, but you can choose how much of it to release and when. You still feel everything. That's a critical point people get wrong about this stage. It isn't about numbness or suppression. It's regulation. A person here might say something like, I still feel the sting of criticism instantly, but I've learned to sit with it for 10 seconds before I decide what to do with it. Relationships transform dramatically at this stage, not because the person stopped having emotions, but because they stopped being ambushed by them. The fourth and rarest stage is the hydroelectric plant, where the same water that once flooded the town is now generating light for it. This is the stage where anger becomes precise motivation instead of destruction, where fear becomes sharpened focus instead of paralysis, where grief becomes depth instead of collapse. People at this stage don't avoid difficulty. They've learned to run the current of every hard emotion through a turbine instead of letting it burst the banks. This isn't mystical. It's the furthest expression of the exact same regulation skill practiced at stage 3, just refined over years. Here's the honest part almost nobody tells you. Movement between these stages isn't a straight staircase. You can operate at stage 3 all week and slide back to stage 1 on a Friday when you're exhausted, underslept, and someone picks exactly the wrong moment to test you. That's not failure. That's simply how the human nervous system works under fatigue. The measure of progress was never, do I ever slip back? It's where do I spend most of my time now, compared to a year ago? That trend line is the only scoreboard that matters. The core method. Knowing all of this matters very little if you don't have something concrete to do in the actual 4 seconds when your chest goes hot and your mouth wants to move faster than your judgment. So here is a simple 4-step sequence you can run in real time in almost any situation in under 30 seconds. It spells core because that's exactly what it's meant to protect. Your core, your center, the steady part of you that doesn't need to prove anything in the heat of a moment. C, catch. The instant you notice heat rising, tight jaw, quickened breath, a flush in your face, a spike of adrenaline. That's your catch moment. You are not trying to catch the trigger before it happens. You're catching your own physical signal that the alarm has already gone off. Most people skip straight past this signal because they're taught to focus outward on the person or situation instead of inward on their own body. The catch is simply saying to yourself, silently, something just fired in me. That's the entire step. No judgment attached, just detection. Observi. Now you look at the sensation itself, without trying to fix it or make it go away. Where is it sitting in your body? Chest, jaw, stomach, hands? What is it specifically? Anger, embarrassment, fear, a mix? This is the step that moves activity from the alarm center of your brain toward the reasoning center, and it does that through the simple mechanical act of naming. You are not analyzing why yet. You are just noticing what, with the curiosity of scientists looking through a microscope rather than a judge handing down a verdict. Reframing. Ask yourself one simple question. What else could this mean? Not to convince yourself the trigger didn't happen or doesn't matter. Simply to break the monopoly your first, fastest interpretation has over your next move. Maybe the curt email was written by someone having the worst day of their year, not an attack on you specifically. Maybe the silence from a friend is exhaustion, not disrespect. You don't have to believe the news story completely. You just have to loosen the grip of the old one long enough to choose your next action from a slightly wider set of options. Engage. Now, and only now, you act deliberately from the wider view instead of the narrow flare. Sometimes engaging means speaking calmly. Sometimes it means staying completely silent. Sometimes it means physically walking away for 10 minutes before responding at all. What matters is that the choice comes from you, on purpose, rather than being extracted from you by the alarm system. You will forget to use core the first dozen times a Real trigger hits. That's completely normal and not a sign you're failing at this. Every single time you remember it, even a few minutes after the fact, and mentally walk through what you would have done differently, you're still building the exact same neural pathway, just on a slight delay. Over weeks, the delay shrinks. Eventually, and this really does happen for people who practice, the whole sequence starts running almost automatically in real time, in the middle of the moment that used to own you completely. Controlled fire. There's a reason elite performers in high-stakes fields, surgeons, pilots, professional athletes, rarely look surprised when things go wrong mid-task. It isn't because they're naturally fearless. It's because they've deliberately exposed themselves to smaller, controlled versions of pressure so many times that the real thing doesn't shock their system the way it would shock an untrained person encountering it for the first time. This is sometimes called stress inoculation, and the name is chosen deliberately. The same way a vaccine introduces a small, manageable dose of a threat so the body can build real resistance to the full-strength version later, small deliberate doses of discomfort build a kind of resistance in your nervous system. The muscle-building comparison is almost too obvious to ignore. Nobody gets strong from a single maximum lift. Strength comes from repeated, moderate strain that the body adapts to and rebuilds slightly stronger than before. Emotional resilience follows an almost identical pattern. Consider a young glassblower learning her craft. In her first year, every mistake near the 1800-degree furnace sent a jolt of panic through her body. Hands shaking, breath shallow, focus scattered exactly when she needed it most. Her mentor didn't tell her to calm down. He had her practice small, deliberately uncomfortable drills, working with the furnace at slightly awkward angles, handling minor mistakes calmly without stopping the piece, staying steady while a customer watched over her shoulder. None of these drills were dangerous. All of them were mildly uncomfortable on purpose. A year later, when a genuinely serious mistake happened mid-project, she didn't panic. Her hands had already rehearsed staying steady under lesser versions of that exact pressure dozens of times. Building this kind of resistance in ordinary life doesn't require anything extreme. It can be as simple as sitting through the discomfort of an uncomfortable conversation instead of avoiding it, speaking first in a meeting when your instinct is to stay quiet, letting your phone sit face down and unanswered for an hour, or practicing a brief, mild physical discomfort like a short cold shower and noticing you can breathe calmly through it rather than tensing up. None of these are the actual crisis. They're rehearsal. And rehearsal is what changes how your nervous system responds when the actual crisis eventually arrives, as it always does. There's a breathing pattern worth learning specifically for these moments, because breath is the one part of the stress response you can directly, consciously influence. A slow, extended exhale, longer than the inhale, for example, breathing in for 4 counts and out for 6, activates the body's natural calming response through the vagus nerve, the same nerve responsible for shifting you out of alarm mode and back in a steady, clear-headed function. Elite performers across completely unrelated fields, pilots, soldiers, surgeons, professional athletes, independently arrive at some version of the same technique because it works on the actual machinery of the nervous system, not just on willpower. The mindset shift underneath all of this is simple to say and takes real repetition to actually believe. Stress is not the enemy. It's a signal that your body is preparing you for something that matters. The goal was never to eliminate the signal. It was to stop being ambushed by it, to have already met a smaller version of it dozens of times before the real one ever knocks. Rewriting the story, here is one of the most quietly powerful facts about the human mind. The event itself almost never breaks a person. The story they immediately tell themselves about the event does. 2 people can face an identical setback and walk away with completely different emotional outcomes, and the only variable that changed was the meaning each one attached to it. There's a simple 4-part chain worth memorizing: event, meaning, emotion, behavior. The event is fixed. It already happened, and no amount of reframing changes the facts of it. The meaning is the story your mind writes about the event almost instantly and almost always without your conscious permission. That meaning produces an emotion, and the emotion drives the behavior that follows. Here's the leverage point most people never notice. You cannot easily change the event after the fact, and you usually can't force an emotion to change directly either. But you absolutely can interrupt the meaning, and when the meaning shifts, everything downstream shifts with it. Take a session violinist who auditioned for a touring orchestra she'd wanted to join for a decade and didn't get the seat. Her first, automatic story was brutal. "I'm not good enough. I've wasted years. I should quit." That story produced despair, and despair produced 3 weeks of barely touching her instrument. A mentor eventually asked her one question: "What if the story isn't I failed, but I wasn't the right fit for this particular ensemble at this particular time?" The event didn't change. The audition results stayed exactly the same. But the second story produced curiosity instead of despair, and curiosity led her back to daily practice within a week instead of 3 months. There's a practical 3-question sequence you can run the moment you notice a painful story forming. First, what story am I telling myself right now about what just happened? Say it plainly in 1 sentence. Second, is this story helping me move forward, or is it just fueling the fire? Be honest. Sometimes a story is technically accurate and still completely useless to hold on to. Third, what's another story that could also be true, given the same facts? You're not required to fully believe the alternative. You just need it to exist as a real option, because the mind cannot compare a story it refuses to generate. There are 3 depths to this kind of reframing worth knowing. The shallowest and most immediately useful asks: what if this is happening for me, not to me? Treating a setback as unwanted training rather than punishment. A deeper layer asks: what does this now make possible that wasn't possible before? A door closing sometimes clears space nobody would have chosen to clear voluntarily. The deepest layer asks a harder question entirely: who do I want to be inside this moment, regardless of how it turns out? That last question stops being about the event at all. It becomes about character, which is the one thing that's always fully within your control, no matter what the event itself does. Watch for 3 common traps that hijack this process before it starts, turning a single mistake into total catastrophe. Assuming someone else's mood or behavior is secretly about you when it usually isn't, and collapsing one failure into a permanent verdict on your entire worth. All 3 distortions share the same fix. Catch them, name them out loud, and this part matters more than people expect. let yourself find them a little bit funny. Humor genuinely weakens their grip in a way that pure self-criticism never does. The focus weapon. Your attention is the single most valuable resource you personally own, and almost nobody treats it that way. Entire industries are built specifically to capture it, fragment it, and sell pieces of it back to you disguised as entertainment. If you don't consciously decide where your focus goes, something else will decide for you, and it usually won't have your best interests in mind. Start with an uncomfortable truth about multitasking. It doesn't actually exist the way people describe it. What feels like doing two things at once is really your brain switching rapidly back and forth between them. And each switch carries a real cost. A measurable dip in the quality of thought immediately afterward, sometimes lasting several minutes before full focus returns. Every notification, every glance at a second screen, every quick interruption isn't free. It's a withdrawal from a limited account, and most people are running that account at a steady, invisible deficit all day long. Consider a chess player competing in a tournament final. An observer once asked her, mid-match, how she managed to stay so composed with the entire room watching and the clock ticking down. Her answer was simple. She had trained herself to see only 64 squares and 32 pieces. Nothing else. Not the crowd, not the clock, not her opponent's confident expression. The moment her focus drifted to the audience even briefly, her position weakened within 2 or 3 moves. The skill wasn't superior calculation. It was superior containment of attention onto exactly what mattered and nothing else. There's a filtering mechanism inside your brain that quietly decides what gets flagged as important enough to notice, based largely on what you've repeatedly told it matters. It's the same mechanism behind a strange, common experience. Buy a particular model of car, and suddenly you notice that exact model everywhere on the road. Not because more of them appeared overnight, but because your filter started flagging them as relevant. This has a serious implication. If your dominant repeated thought is, everything is overwhelming, your filter will diligently supply evidence for that story all day. If your dominant thought is, I can handle what's in front of me, the same filter starts supplying different evidence instead. 3 thieves consistently steal focus, and naming them helps you catch each one in the act. The first is constant low-grade distraction, notifications, tab switching, background noise, which erodes deep thought not through one dramatic event, but through 1,000 tiny interruptions. The second is overthinking, which disguises itself as careful preparation while actually just replaying worst-case scenarios on a loop without producing any action. The fix for overthinking is almost always the same simple question. What's the next smallest concrete action I can take right now? Then take it immediately, before the loop can restart. The third thief is emotional flooding itself. You simply cannot focus cleanly while your nervous system is mid-alarm, which is exactly why everything in the earlier chapters of this framework has to come first. Practically, focus responds well to working in short, deliberately bounded stretches, somewhere in the range of 25 to 50 minutes of undistracted work followed by genuine rest, rather than attempting to stay sharp for hours without a break. And perhaps the most underrated focus tool of all is simply saying no more often. Every commitment you accept quietly divides the attention available for everything else you've already said yes to. The people who accomplish the most rarely do more things than everyone else. They do fewer things, with dramatically less division of attention across each one. Naming the storm. Most people carry an emotional vocabulary of about 5 or 6 words. Happy, sad, angry, stressed, fine, tired, and try to run the entire complexity of human experience through that narrow filter. It's a bit like trying to paint a detailed sunset using only 2 colors. The paintings all come out roughly the same muddy shade, not because the sunset lacks detail, but because the palette does. There's real neurological value in naming a feeling precisely rather than vaguely. The simple act of finding the accurate word for what you're experiencing measurably calms the alarm center of the brain and re-engages the reasoning center. This isn't a soft, symbolic exercise. It's closer to a mechanical override switch. Vague feelings stay large and shapeless and overwhelming. Precisely named feelings shrink to a manageable size almost immediately, the way a shape becomes less frightening the moment you turn on the light and see exactly what is. Take the word stressed, probably the single most overused word in modern life. It gets applied to a missed deadline, a difficult conversation, a long commute, and a genuine health scare, as if all four produce the same internal experience. They don't. Underneath one person's stress might be a fear of being seen as incompetent. Underneath another's might be plain physical exhaustion. Underneath a third might be grief about something entirely unrelated to the task at hand. You cannot solve a problem you've labeled too vaguely to actually locate, and stressed is often exactly that, a label so broad it hides the real, specific, solvable thing underneath it. Try picturing every emotion as having 3 layers, like an excavation site. The surface layer is the first word that comes to mind, usually something generic like angry or anxious. The signal layer sits just beneath it and asks what the emotion is actually pointing toward: a crossed boundary, an uncertain outcome, a genuine loss. The source layer sits deepest and asks what old pattern or fear this particular moment is connecting to. A marketing director who felt inexplicably furious every time a junior colleague questioned her plan eventually dug down and found the source. A fear, dating back to her first job, of being quietly seen as replaceable. Once she named that specific source, the anger lost most of its charge within days. Not because the junior colleague stopped questioning her, but because the real target of the fear had finally been located and could be addressed directly instead of leaking out sideways as irritation. Most complex emotions sort into a small number of broader families worth knowing. Fear tends to be about protection. It's flagging genuine uncertainty ahead. Anger tends to be about boundaries. Something that mattered to you got crossed or violated. Sadness tends to be about loss or meaning. It's marking that something genuinely mattered to you. And connection-based emotions like joy or gratitude tend to signal alignment, a sense that something in your life currently fits. Treating each of these as information rather than instruction changes everything. Fear is telling you something might go wrong, not commanding you to freeze. Anger is telling you a line was crossed, not commanding you to attack. A simple 2-week practice builds this skill faster than almost anything else. Every time you notice a strong feeling, write down exactly what triggered it. Name the feeling as precisely as you can rather than settling for the first generic word. And note what you think you actually needed in that moment. Within days, patterns will surface that you likely never noticed before, simply because you never slowed down long enough to look for them directly. Falling in love with the work. Nearly everyone wants the result. Very few people want the daily repetition required to earn it. And that gap between wanting the outcome and wanting the process quietly determines who actually gets there and who burns out somewhere along the way. When you fixate on the outcome, will I win? Will they approve? Will this work out? Your attention splits in 2 directions at once. Part of it on the task in front of you, and part of it anxiously monitoring a result you can't actually control yet. That split attention is expensive. It's the same mechanism from the previous chapter, applied specifically to performance under pressure. Every ounce of focus spent worrying about the scoreboard is an ounce not spent on the actual play happening right now. And the actual play is the only thing you ever had real influence over. Think about a marathon runner in her 4th attempt at qualifying for a major race. Her first 3 attempts, she spent each mile mentally calculating her projected finish time. And every time the math looked slightly off pace, panic crept in and her form fell apart. On her 4th attempt, her coach gave her one instruction: forget the finish line completely and focus only on the next 100 meters, on her breathing rhythm, on her form. Nothing else. She qualified that day, running almost the exact same physical effort as her previous failed attempts. The difference wasn't fitness. It was where her attention lived for 3 straight hours. Picture a potter at the wheel, fully absorbed in the pressure of her fingers against spinning clay, the exact moisture level, the precise angle needed to raise the walls of the vessel evenly. If she's thinking about how the finished piece will be judged at the gallery opening 3 weeks away, her hands lose their sensitivity in the present moment, and the piece wobbles. The judging happens later. The clay only exists now. Mastery in any field looks almost identical to this. Total absorption in what's directly in front of the hands, with the eventual outcome trusted to take care of itself as a natural byproduct of the process being done well, repeatedly, over time. There's a practical shift available here, starting today. Before any high-stakes moment, write down explicitly what's within your control and what isn't, and commit your entire attention only to the first list. You cannot control whether a client says yes. You can control how well you prepared. You cannot control the weather on race day. You can control your pacing and your breathing. This single act of separation, done deliberately on paper before the moment arrives, creates a strange and reliable calm, because you've stopped trying to hold on to things that were never yours to hold in the first place. There's an old idea, often summarized simply as chop wood, carry water. Before mastery, chop wood, carry water. After mastery, chop wood, carry water. The tasks never stop being ordinary. What changes is the relationship to them, from resentful obligation to genuine devotion. That shift, more than any single technique in this entire framework, is what separates people who sustain excellence for decades from people who burn brightly for one impressive season and disappear. The contingency mind, calm under real pressure, is rarely spontaneous. Almost every time you see someone stay composed during a genuine crisis, what you're actually witnessing is the visible tip of invisible preparation that happened long before the crisis arrived. There's a decision-making technique, sometimes called a pre-mortem, and it works almost like a reverse autopsy performed before anything has actually gone wrong. Instead of asking, what if this succeeds, you deliberately ask, what could cause this to fail, and what would I do the moment I noticed it happening? It sounds pessimistic at first glance. In practice, it's the opposite. It's one of the most proactive habits available, because it surfaces weak points in a plan while there's still time to reinforce them, and it predecides your response before emotion has a chance to cloud the decision later. A sea captain preparing for a long crossing during hurricane season doesn't simply hope for good weather. She plots at least 2 alternate routes before ever leaving port, identifies exactly which ports could serve as safe harbor at each stage of the journey, and briefs her crew on precisely what actions to take at several different warning thresholds. Not because she expects disaster, but because respecting the possibility of disaster is what allows her to sail with genuine calm instead of either false confidence or constant low-grade anxiety. If the storm comes, she isn't improvising for the first time under pressure. She's simply executing a plan that already exists. This translates directly into daily emotional life through a simple structure known as if-then planning. If a project I'm leading falls apart publicly, then I will take 24 hours before responding to anyone, and I will lead with what we learned rather than who's to blame. If someone attacks me verbally in a meeting, then I will breathe for a full count of 4 before I say a single word. If I make a visible, embarrassing mistake in front of people whose opinion matters to me, then I will acknowledge it directly and specifically rather than deflecting or over-explaining. Deciding these responses in advance, while calm, removes an enormous amount of pressure from the moment itself. You're not inventing your character under fire. You're simply executing a decision your calmer self already made for you. There's a real and important balance to hold here, because taken too far, this kind of preparation curdles into anxiety rather than readiness. The goal is never to obsessively expect disaster around every corner. It's closer to the mindset of an experienced mountaineer who checks their equipment and studies the weather thoroughly before every climb. Not because they expect to fall, but out of genuine respect for the mountain. That's confidence built on preparation, which feels entirely different from confidence built on simply refusing to consider what could go wrong. Notice, too, that when one person in a group has clearly done this kind of preparation, their steadiness tends to spread to everyone around them almost immediately. Teams unconsciously mirror whoever seems to have already thought this through. Families mirror whichever parent seems steady under pressure. That calm cannot be faked convincingly in a genuine crisis, but it can be earned in advance through exactly this kind of quiet, unglamorous preparation that nobody sees until the moment it's suddenly needed. The discipline of rest. There's a persistent myth that the most disciplined people are the ones who never stop pushing. Look closely at anyone sustaining real performance over years rather than months, and you'll find the opposite pattern. Deliberate, scheduled, unapologetic rest, treated with exactly the same seriousness as the work itself. Think about how a blacksmith actually strengthens steel. The heating and hammering matter, but so does the tempering, the deliberate cooling that follows, which is precisely what keeps the metal from becoming brittle under repeated stress. Skip the tempering and the steel might look identical after forging, but it will crack the first time real pressure hits it. Human nervous systems follow an almost identical pattern. Push without recovery, and you don't get stronger. You get brittle, right up until the moment something ordinary finally cracks you. There's a real physiological switch involved here, between an activated state that prepares you for effort and a recovery state that actually does the repairing. Genuine growth and genuine emotional processing mostly happen during the recovery phase, not the effort phase. Constant activation without any return to recovery isn't dedication. It's slow erosion, and it usually goes unnoticed until it shows up as exhaustion, irritability, or a reaction wildly out of proportion to whatever small thing finally triggered it. Rest itself comes in more than one form, and both matter. There's passive rest, sleep, stillness, genuine silence, which restores the body. And there's active rest, a walk without a phone, honest reflection, real connection with people who matter to you, which restores the mind in a different way. Alongside both is reflection, which is where actual wisdom gets extracted from experience. Without it, the same difficult pattern tends to repeat itself indefinitely because nothing was ever learned from the last time it happened, only survived. A simple 5-minute end-of-day habit does more for this than almost any elaborate system. What went well today? What challenged me and why? What did I learn about myself? And what will I do slightly differently tomorrow? Written down, even briefly, this small ritual turns each day into a lesson instead of a repeat, and it compounds quietly over months into a genuinely different level of self-awareness than simply living reactively, one similar day after another. If you're already exhausted right now, reading this, genuinely running on empty rather than simply tired from one hard week, the answer isn't a more aggressive system layered on top of the exhaustion. It's slowing all the way down first. Real sleep, a simplified routine, permission to rebuild gradually rather than demanding an immediate return to full intensity. Recovery isn't the reward you earn after the real work. It's part of the actual work, and treating it as optional is one of the most reliable ways to quietly undo everything else in this entire framework. The habit loop. Nothing in this entire framework works as a single insight applied once. It works as a small number of simple actions, repeated so consistently that they eventually stop requiring conscious effort at all. Think of the way a path forms across an open field. The first time someone walks a new route, there's no visible trail at all, just undisturbed grass. But each time the same route gets walked again, the grass bends a little further, until eventually a clear, permanent path exists that requires no thought to follow. Neural pathways form in almost exactly this way. The core method, the trigger inventory, the naming exercise, the end-of-day reflection, none of them need to be done perfectly. They need to be walked repeatedly, even imperfectly, until the path exists on its own. Pick one practice from everything covered here and commit to it daily for the next 30 days before adding a second one. Trying to install 5 new habits simultaneously is one of the most common ways this entire kind of framework quietly fails. Not because the ideas were wrong, but because no single path ever gets walked often enough to actually form. The Unshakeable Self. Everything in this framework points toward one destination: becoming the calm center in rooms that are falling apart around you. Not because you feel nothing, but because you've trained the space between what happens to you and what you do about it. A veteran commercial pilot once described the moment severe turbulence hit mid-flight, passengers gasping audibly behind the cockpit door. His hands didn't shake. His voice over the intercom didn't waver. Not because the turbulence wasn't real. The plane was genuinely being thrown around. But because he'd trained specifically for this exact scenario dozens of times before it ever happened for real, and his calm, steady voice over the speakers did something remarkable. It calmed an entire cabin full of strangers who couldn't see him based on tone alone. That's what an unshakable center actually does in practice. It doesn't just protect you. It becomes something other people can borrow from simply by being near it. Your new beginning. You won't master any of this in a single sitting, and that was never the point of listening today. The point was to plan a wider gap, a sharper vocabulary, and a handful of concrete tools between whatever happens to you tomorrow and however you decide to respond to it. The next time life hands you a genuine trigger, and it will probably sooner than you'd like, you don't owe the world an instant reaction. You owe yourself one honest breath first. That's the entire practice. One breath, repeated for the rest of your life. If this gave you something worth using, stay close. Next time, we go even deeper into building genuine mental stillness, the kind that holds steady long before the storm ever arrives. Until then, breathe and begin.